At one point, I removed myself from all social media except for LinkedIn, because I found that was a real emotional distraction as well as an audible distraction with the notifications, etc. It was kind of a double-edged sword because you get that notification, you get a like on your post. That's a bit of a dopamine hit, and that's something you kind of crave as well. And growing up neurodivergent, where you feel like an outsider and you get someone liking you, that again, it creates that dopamine feeling. So it can give you some real good feeling, but you can almost obsess over that. But then the other thing I found is when you're struggling and you're going through hard times, you look at social media and all you see is the good stuff that people post, and you start comparing yourself to all the good things, and then it snowballs and cycles, and you feel worse and worse. So I made this decision to remove myself from Facebook, Twitter, etc. Everything apart from LinkedIn went at some point, and that made that was a huge benefit. Life was hard. I always felt a little bit different to other people. Never felt I fitted in. I used to suffer a lot with social anxiety, lots of anxiety, and I loved order and structure. And I write in my recent book that I loved. One thing I loved was art sets. With the pencils as a kid, because they're all lined up, but I wouldn't use them because I wanted them to all look the same and in order and sharp, and absolutely love order. But I did struggle. I struggled with what I now know as depression for many years as a child. I remember some very dark days from probably the age of 8 or 9, and a lot of those dark days coincided definitely with the start of school. That was something I really struggled with. By the time I left school, my attendance was 50%. Really struggled. And coming from a working class background, I never knew anyone that went to university or anything. So it to me, GCSE results, I kind of knew I was going to fail them anyway, possibly because of my attendance and my struggles at school. But no one around me used anything like that. So I didn't even bother collecting my results. I didn't see it was worth it.
With regards, thank you so much for sharing that, Gavin. And you know, the school days is we were talking, you know, before this conversation around kind of the school days, how they still impact you as an individual, even as an adult. And I mentioned, you know, the grand old age of 49, I guess there's not a week that goes by that I don't speak about my school experience or the educational side of it. And this does have a lasting impact, doesn't it, throughout your adult life as well?
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. It can be the root of stuff like imposter syndrome and lack of confidence, and even some of your anxieties as you grow up. It's that almost that trying to smash a square peg into the round hole. You've got the flatline profile of all your different strengths, etc., fine motor skills, visual spatial reasoning, all that sort of stuff, and education and business much of the time want you to fit that flatline profile, but many of us that are neurodivergent have a spiky profile, and we will have many great positives that aren't really looked at, and all the negatives that are looked at. For example, dyslexia is this. You're looking at the negatives. You're looking at what you can't do. ADHD is a disorder, and there's always that negative spin. But I mean, what you've probably got, Darren, and what many people that are dyslexic have got is this ability to visualize almost in 3D in your mind's eye. And something that was massively powerful for me, I was on a course around neurodiversity, and we were asked if we could all think about an elephant and try and visualize an elephant. And then we went around the room and described our elephant. Now, for me, I described the long eyelashes, the big brown eye, the wrinkly skin, and all the detail. There were some people that couldn't visualize anything. Other people that said it's just big and grey. And other people described the background and the surroundings it was in as well. And I found that fascinating. And the education system isn't set up to teach you stuff like that and look at those different skills that you might have. It treats everyone along that same plane. And I say a lot that I was taught the Battle of Hastings was in 1066. I was taught chiaroscuro was a form of shading, but I wasn't taught that I was an introvert or how my brain worked. And that to me would be so much more beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny when you mentioned the elephant, straight away I was thinking of, like something around its neck and something, and then someone riding the elephant, and then I was like, my mind just completely just sort of went off on a tirade of different things, of color and nuance that I could add to it. So going back to kind of the educational side of it, you're absolutely right. I guess we're conditioned in a way to learn in the same way, at the same pace, in the same. I mean, if we look at the educational system, I'm back in the day when we talked back to year 1 to 5. Now it's kind of 6, 7. I still get confused by it. But if we say when we go into secondary school or high school, if people listen to this in America, we ultimately have a year theoretically to do the same thing at the same pace, the same things everyone else, and be taught in the same way. And then if we fall behind that, then we're just going to be struggling. And I just don't understand it in a work culture. I mean, there's a lot, we'll go on to the work culture shortly, but I just don't understand how we are expected to work in that way in the education system. It seems a little disparate, doesn't it, from the ways that it works? And
it does. I mean, as I've done some professional development, I've learned that people learn differently, and you've got some people are visual learners, some people are doers, and they need to get up. Those more on the ADHD side of neurodiversity will need to move about and do stuff. Someone like yourself, dyslexic, and I myself, I can visualize stuff, as I'm a very, very visual learner. And I truly believe in the education system that we need to take that approach, and we should get different learning types in different areas. And these different learning types also suit very different roles when it comes into the business world. Absolutely.
So when what kind of school for you was very tricky, very, very difficult, emotionally and that side of it? What was the kind of, because you what was your kind of motivation then with regards to when you kind of left school and went into kind of the workplace? What was that transition like? Was it very difficult?
It was extremely difficult. I did struggle to get a job at first. It was really hard. And then I've had jobs where, for example, I was pushed by the career service to go and do manual labor. That wasn't me. I wasn't very dexterous. I wasn't very fit. I wasn't one of the lads. I was very much a loner. And my first job was a felt roofing company, and I was bundled in the back of the van and driven about 30 miles away, and sat on these rolls of felt in the back of the van. There was very much a lack of health and safety then, and up and down this ladder with kegs of bitumen on my shoulder, and I lasted 3 days. It was not me, but that's what I was being driven to, because the view was, if you're no good academically, that's what you're going to go and do, and it just wasn't the right environment for me. Environment's something I talk a lot about. In some of the talks I talk about, for example, we're all like different plants. So can you imagine a cactus, an orchid, okay, and a sunflower, okay, and a rose? So you've got those, you put them all in one environment, such as a classroom or an office environment, okay. Maybe that environment is the equivalent of an arid dry desert, because the leader there, or the culture, is driven by a cactus, and they know that the best place to survive and thrive is an arid dry desert. So then you've got the rose and the orchid, and they're all struggling, and they're not blooming, they're just dying. And we need that awareness of everyone needs a different environment in order to thrive. And if we can try and create that, it'd be so much beneficial, so much more beneficial. I know, yes, we need to push outside of our comfort zones, and sometimes that rose needs to go and stay in the desert and become a little bit hardy, but we need an awareness that you can't do that all the time, because that's going to just burn you out and you'll wilt, and yeah, off you go.
Absolutely, that's a beautiful analogy, and you're absolutely right. Those environments are so different, and each one needs the conditions and the water and the care and everything else to thrive. And it's the same, with the human side of it. With regards to kind of support, then, was there? I mean, I look back on my careers day with school, which was just, I remember going into the school kind of gymnasium, and there it was, where they kind of had, basketball nets at both the sides and stuff. And I always remember there was two pasting tables, one at the very far end. I don't know why they separated them out. Maybe they just thought that it would be better. But one at the very end, where at the end of the hall, and one here. And there was two people there for a careers day. Not like they have now, where you go to these universities and colleges and stuff. They've got, a plethora of different tables. I kid you not, I went in. There was one from the army that was looking for, and they used the terminology cannon fodder. That was what they that was their terminology that they used, and I didn't even know what that meant, that terminology. So they were trying to sign you up to join the army. And the other pasting table was a lady from the council, and so the advice I had was either go and join the army, or go and the lady from the council was there, and I kid you not, I wish I kept one of these, was a pamphlet, and it was a color-coded pamphlet, and it was the best ways to get a council house. And they would tell you things like, if you were with a partner and then you had a child, then your score charts would go up. And we were kind of just sort of leaving school. So I remember leaving school. I mean, I left school similar to yourself, no qualifications, but with two pamphlets on that day, thinking, do I want to try and push for a council house, or do I want to push to go to the army? And what I'm getting at here is what was the kind of guidance and level of support for you leaving school and going into the world? Was there any one that spoke to you about certain things? Was there any guidance in that way?
Not really. There was a little. So there is one great story around this, actually, but I remember my careers day meeting. I went in, I was absolutely obsessed, as I would be, being autistic. You do have these obsessions and stuff that you're so passionate about. And mine was fishing, and anything to do with fishing. And a friend here, James, I know he's listening, is also a passionate angler. And I wanted to be a fish farmer. And that's what I told my careers teacher, or a professional angler. And I was told, no, you can't. No, almost laughed at me and said, no, you need to look at CITB and get into the construction industry. And so that's the only advice I was given. But one great story from this is I had one teacher, Mrs. Cooper, who I know now as Jane. So Mrs. Cooper was my English literature teacher. And when I was really in school, I was behind, Miss Cooper would give me this separate little classroom. It was actually a teacher's office. And I'd go in there and she'd give me a 400-word essay. I'd write 800 words. I just couldn't. I had this knack. Once I started writing, I couldn't stop. And that was the only spark I had in me for when I left school, that I might be good at something. That stayed with me for years, how that teacher treated me. And as I was writing my book that we'll probably come on to later, I thought back to this teacher, Mrs. Cooper, and why was she different? I thought much about it. I used to speak to Mrs. Cooper about fishing a lot. And I used to tell her that I wanted to be a professional match angler. And she said, you can't do that. You can't do it. You've got to have a proper career choice. Okay. You can have your dreams, but you got a proper career choice. It just so happens 2 years after school, I bumped into her, and I was working for an ex-world champion angler called Ian Heaps. He won the world championships in 1976 in Poland, I believe. And I was working with him and 2 other ex-world champions, touring the country, doing fishing roadshows and getting paid for it. And I told Mrs. Cooper in this chance meeting a couple of years after school I was doing it. And she was astonished. And I never saw her again until I started writing this book, and I finally got in contact with her through a Facebook group for the school. And she was like, I remember you. You're the boy that never stopped talking about fishing. And I went, wow, how do you remember? It's been over 30 years. And she said, I've told nearly every pupil about you. And I went, what do you mean? She went, well, I remember this little boy that was obsessed with fishing. And I like fishing as well, so we used to talk about it a lot. And I told you that you shouldn't chase that dream. You need to be serious and get a proper job. And then I met you one day, a couple of years later, and you'd actually achieved part of your dream. You were getting paid for fishing. So she said, since then, I told all the other pupils about you and told them to always chase their dreams. And it was so amazing. And we've met for lunch a few times since, and we've become really, really good friends. And Jane has actually marked my homework one last time. She edited my book and also wrote the afterword, which was absolutely amazing.
Gavin, that is an absolute beautiful story. And I think, that's a legacy story, isn't it? Because how wonderful is that you then helped generations with your story in the work that you're doing. I think that's absolutely phenomenal, and kudos to yourself. And I think it's very easy for people to say, and I think they just, that's obviously coming from a very caring nature of look, you need a proper career because you need to earn the money, and we want to make sure that you can put food on the table and all the other bits and pieces, and all those things. And there is this element, and when you've gone back and said, actually, this is what I've done, but it's completely blown our mind.
Yeah, it's kind of like that elephant thing again. Is the teacher is telling you, no, you need to do this, but they can't always see what you can see. They don't understand those different skills and strengths that people might have. And it's about getting to know that person. And I'm always talking about asking why. Another story I like to share is we talk about the 5 whys in business to find the root cause of something, and I've mentioned it to many teachers. So, for example, one of my sons would often get sent to reset because he's fidgeting, or he's got ADHD and going through an autism diagnosis, and he'd fidget or sit on his chair a little bit like that, and he'd get sent to reset. But I asked the teacher to think about the 5 whys and understand what children in their class are going through and why they're getting certain behaviour. And one example I use a lot is you've got a child tapping a pencil on the desk. Okay, so you call out because they're disrupting the rest of the kids. And they continue doing it, called out, and eventually, as many schools do, the name then goes on the board. The child's getting more frustrated, tapping and moving, and they get sent to reset. So they get this nice quiet room, which is not a discipline, it's where they want to be, in a nice quiet room on their own. But that is just dealing with the problem, okay? But children are doing that to communicate in some way, or they sometimes can't help it. So if you start asking why is little Tom tapping his pencil on the desk? Well, he finished his work, and it was a reading task. So why has he finished early? Well, Tom is an expert reader. He's just got this hyper focus with his neurodiversity that he can speed read through and absorb stuff quickly, because he's in that right mindset. And then why has he done it even more when he's been asked not to? Well, because he's felt that anxiety of having his name written on the board and being called out. He was seen as different, and he's kind of embarrassed. Would a head teacher call out a teacher and write their name on the board in the staff room when they're having a staff meeting? I don't think so. It would be, total embarrassment for him. So when you start to understand why, this little Tom, he's actually tapping his pencil because he's finished his work quickly. And if you understand that, the teacher could then go, right, okay, if we get a reading task, Tom is going to whip through it quick. He's going to get bored and he's going to struggle. He can't sit still. He just cannot sit still. So let's give him a task that he has on the side that he then does once he's finished his main task to keep him active, or go and collect a register, or get him moving out of class so he doesn't disrupt others. Then, instead of getting a child that leaves school that thinks they're a nuisance and annoying and a pain and different to the others, you've got a kid that realizes they're genius.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think it's that planning, isn't it, and that support mechanism to understand, this is the task ahead. And I guess it's that generic, isn't it? Expecting everyone to be able to do the task and finish more or less at the same time, and then just be able to just sit and await for the next instructions. And it's understanding each person's needs of what that actually happens. The test is 60 minutes, and
it's environment. And one thing that started to, as I started to go through an autism diagnosis later in life, and as I started to learn about myself, I did a management development course, and we were told about storytelling and how powerful storytelling is. And part of that, we were played this section of a TED talk. I forget the guy's name who was talking, but instead of having the effect of teaching me about storytelling, this taught me something completely new. So this guy was talking about a little girl called Gillian Lynn, who's now known as Dame Gillian Lynn. I'm not sure if you've heard of Dame Gillian Lynn. Yeah. So she was a little girl in 1930s, sat in this classroom, and she was that disruptive child, like little Tom that I just described. And she was going to get expelled from school. She was getting disciplined at school because she was disruptive, and she was taken to the doctors by her mum. And they spoke to her, and the doctor said to her mum, "Can I just talk to you outside?" And turned the old 1940s wooden radio up a little bit, went outside, and they closed the door, looked through the window, and little Gillian was dancing. And he said, "Look, I want to tell you, your daughter isn't broken. She isn't naughty. She's just a dancer." And from that, then they sent her to art school, and she's now known as Dame Gillian Lynn, with us no longer, unfortunately. But Dame Gillian Lynn was the choreographer of Cats and was eventually a millionaire just through trying to find the right environment for that child and understanding that child.
Absolutely, and how beautiful is that? And we, during, as this discussion's going on, this conversation's going on, and I can't emphasize enough how much environment it played a part in the stories that you've, the beautiful stories that you've shared. But obviously, in everything we do, environment just really is so important, isn't it?
It is massively important. It can have a huge impact, and a lot of people talk about the trend of diagnosis. And it's everyone wants to be a diagnosed, everyone wants to be a label, and you've got certain politicians. I won't mention parties, but now talking about how parents of neurodivergent children just want to make money. But it's lost my train of thought there. But it's getting that right environment is absolutely key. That was it. The environment is come back now. Sorry, Darren. That's the neurodivergent brain for you, isn't it? All those thoughts firing off. So, but yeah, you've got to change an environment. Okay, so back when we were growing up at school, there was no mobile phones, there was no Facebook, there was no internet. Okay, the world was a much quieter place. Okay, there was much more discipline. You physically disciplined. One of my friends was dyslexic and physically disciplined at school because he struggled with his reading. So as we've changed, we're understanding more, we're asking more questions, we're talking about mental health more. So people have that ability to open up. Plus, you've got more noise. coming in from everywhere. And I'm talking about lighting in supermarkets. You've got noise of traffic and everything's so busy, pings on your mobile phone. That creates a very, very different environment to what we had in the 1980s, which is why you're then seeing much more diagnosis. Alongside that, my thoughts are it's that multiplication effect. So you'll have one neurodivergent person, marries a neurotypical person, have children, it's genetic, you end up with 3 neurodivergent people, and so that pattern goes on. And this is why we're seeing more and more neurodiversity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to kind of touch on the fact that you mentioned around kind of, the I guess the enormous amounts of noise and distractions. Now, I know for me personally as an adult, I have to be really careful because I get led by my phone. So, and it's like I don't know, like a fruit machine continuously. It bings, it zaps, it makes all these different noises. And then I'm led literally, oh, it's a notification. What is that? It's an email. It's a social media. And you have to be really, really careful on that. How do you manage your well-being when it comes to kind of the distractions, I guess, or the continuous noise?
Well, at one point, I removed myself from all social media except for LinkedIn, because I found that was a real emotional distraction as well as an audible distraction with the notifications, etc. It was kind of a double-edged sword because you get that notification, you get a like on your post. That's a bit of a dopamine hit, and that's something you kind of crave as well. And growing up neurodivergent, where you feel like an outsider and you get someone liking you, that again, it creates that dopamine feeling. So it can give you some real good feeling, but you can almost obsess over that. But then the other thing I found is when you're struggling and you're going through hard times, you look at social media and all you see is the good stuff that people post, and you start comparing yourself to all the good things, and then it snowballs and cycles, and you feel worse and worse. So I made this decision to remove myself from Facebook, Twitter, etc. Everything apart from LinkedIn went at some point, and that made that was a huge benefit. Absolutely, really made a difference to me. But you've got to kind of, it's like that. Like I said, the rose sometimes has to be in the desert. Sometimes you need all this going on to make a difference, but you need to be aware of what environment you need, and you need to know where you need to go back to reboost your energy. And to me, it's been on my own. I'm very introverted, and thinking back, that's why I love fishing. It's the quiet, it's the nature, and sitting there, and your brain just calms. I don't know if you've ever, we've got kids and you're in a noisy room, the kids are running about, and suddenly it stops. You can hear that deadly silence, and you're like, wow, you can physically feel the difference that makes. I had it the other week as well when I was in the supermarket, and some of these supermarkets get these Sen sort of mornings, so they'll have the lights on lower and the music turned off or very low. And I was in the supermarket, and I found in the past, I think I just block it out. I just block it. You go within yourself. But I was shopping, and it was at the end of one of these sessions, and the lights come up and the noise went on. And I was like, wow. And it's just shocking how much that can impact you. But you just, because you just absorb it and don't take notice, you don't realize the impact that's having on you.
Absolutely. I tend to wear, and it is interesting. We won't go into too much detail, but obviously we know that there's, a certain post going out on LinkedIn at the moment where they're talking about children wearing, headphones or ear defenders, and it's a form of madness. And this is a terminology used by a politician, because I personally feel like the oversensitivity of light for me as well, and for noise. So I literally have my headphones, my earpods all the time. And whenever I go into a supermarket, I tend to have those on, or if I'm in a train station or a busy thing, and I'm just pumping out kind of classical music, purely because that kind of desensitizes sometimes the environment. And then other times I'm kind of loud and I'm in the moment, but then I need time to put the headphones on and just kind of decompress within that side of it. And I feel I've learned coping mechanisms around that. But when it comes to social media, and a lot of it is, like you said, that endorphins and the visual side of it. And I think as well, sometimes we're now in a generation now where we can contact anyone at any time throughout the world. And I think it's got to a point now where people want an instant reply, to things. The only thing I'd say is people don't want an instant reply to, I guess, it's slowed down his emails. I mean, I still struggle sometimes with emails, trying to understand how they fit. They fit in the sense of, because the terminology we use on social media is different to what we would do on WhatsApp, and then WhatsApp's different to how we would communicate on emails. And this sometimes can be a real communication barrier, can't it? Because we're almost masked in certain ways of how we communicate verbally and written in so many different formats.
I find my communication styles are very, very different, written and verbally, and in my head. I can communicate things fantastically in my head. I go and try and talk about it, and it all comes out in gobbledygook, or I get lost in my millions of thoughts that are pinging around my head. The one thing I use to help me is AI. I found that, so it was Grammarly to start with, which is AI before it was known as AI, really. And I know what I want to type. I'll type it out and then just get a little bit of assistance to make sure that it comes across in the right way. I've learned so much about communication over the years, though. My communication was probably left a lot to be desired when I first stepped from that working class Binman into the office. It was such a change for me. And my emails used to be more like essays. And also I remember a complaint once because I was so direct and far too direct. And probably those unknown rules of not writing things like "as per my last email," those microaggressions, but you just don't. It's just a fact. It's as per my last email, but you don't realize that it's almost unwritten rules. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to come on to now kind of talking about writing, because I've got a little surprise for you, Gavin. I've got your book here.
Aha.
So I want to kind of so for people that are listening to this, I'm holding Gavin's book. It's Binman to Boardroom. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how this book came about, and a little bit of kind of information about it that to our listeners?
Yeah, so I kind of had this idea probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was, that I had this idea that I was going to write a book about my journey. And the reason being is, one of the reasons behind it is I'm a lover of books. So you can't see here, but there's floor to ceiling bookshelves all around me. And there's one there that was no longer diagnosed, but Asperger's. We used to diagnose autism as Asperger's. It's now autism spectrum disorder. And I read this book, and it was like reading my life story up until then. It was like so powerful, and it gave me validation. And it really, really helped me. It gave me as much validation as it did get my diagnosis. It made me believe that I'm not the only one going through that, and I wasn't mad. And it had such a profound effect on me. I thought, I need to do this for other people, and I need to write my story. I need to inspire others, that other people from a neurodivergent or lower social economic background can do what I've done. I've thought role models that really, really help, and I've had certain role models throughout my life. So I wanted to be that role model for other people. And it was the other thing, it was good therapy for me as well. It took me 3 or 4 years to write. However, I actually did most of the writing in probably just over a couple of months. And most of this was because of going through those thoughts of, what will people think? What would it do to my career? what would others think about me? But I managed to battle through that and get through that, and thought, do you know what? There's going to be some people that don't like it. There's going to be some people that don't agree with it. There's some people that say, shut up and get on with it. But I know there's a hell of a lot of people that it will really, really help. And I've been very, very open and honest in that book, really open and honest, because I don't want to be that social media shiny, just show the good stuff. I've shown the really bad stuff in there as well. And it can be quite dark at times, the book, but there is a really, really good ending to it.
I think what you've done effectively, Gavin, is you like, you know, when you told your teacher and you went back and then your teacher then tells the students, what this effectively done now is you've created I guess like a again, my dyslexia is kind of, you've created this book, and what that will do is it will help so many people to kind of relate to that. And maybe they're in a position that they're in now, and they think actually they want to aspire to be something else or do something else. And they understand now that the challenges that they go through, it's understandable. Like, you've gone through those challenges, and they can kind of relate to that. So you've created this book, which is going to be kind of, you know, a great stepping stone for people to relate to.
100%. And the book's in two parts. So you've got the first part is my journey from very early days in school and how I got on for school, through to the Binman days, and right through to now working for a global automotive manufacturer, and now I'm just going on to be an entrepreneur and start my own businesses. But the second part of the book is more about talking about change and how we should change and how it's always been there. So I've got a great section, I love it, and it's more sort of role models. So I talk about all the neurodivergent people from the past and the present. So you've got, for example, Einstein, who didn't start talking till he was nearly 4 years old, and he struggled at school to start with. He failed his first college exams, and there's some real fascinating insights. And I forget the guy's name who I think it's Ingrad, who from IKEA. Okay, and he's famously dyslexic, and the reason the IKEA products have a name instead of a product number was he was just struggling with the product numbers, and so he gave his product names, and some fascinating stuff. And it shows that it's always been there. This isn't a new trend. It's not something modern. It's been there for years. Absolutely.
With regards to kind of so. I find kind of a lot. So when I left school, my first job was pushing trolleys 12 hours a week. Yeah. And I remember back in the day, many, many years ago, when I kind of started advocacy work, like 20 years ago, I remember doing a talk, and I pinned it trolley collector to company director. And it was very similar in the sense of the journey. And I love listening to people's journey. It's one of the reasons why we created, Neurodiversity Stories, to hear people's journey. And I just want you to never underestimate, when you mentioned some people will like it, some people won't like it, some people will tell you to shut up. Some, like, I think that's an inherent thing in that you feel, maybe, it. What I would say is the fact that you've created this is an absolute marvel, and it will help so many people. And a lot of people will reach out to you, Gavin, and a lot of people will say it's really helped me on my journey. And some people will say it's helped, but they won't reach out. And I think, as I mentioned before, it's that pebble effect. Okay, so I think it's absolutely tremendous. Can I ask, what was that kind of? We find a lot of people that leave school that are neurodivergent that tend to kind of go into, I'm not being stereotypical in that sense. I'm just talking from my own experiences, certain jobs which are very manual in the sense, because I guess qualifications are needed to go into, to certain things after that. So there are kind of like a manual job, whether it's warehouse, whether it's trolley collecting, whether it's binman, whether these things, and that's absolutely fine. What was that kind of mindset and the motivation? And what encouraged you to then think, actually, I want to progress and do something else after this? Because you could have just stayed where you were. Yeah. With the school and the educational side of it that you had, and the lack of kind of support in that sense, and then you find yourself, in that position. What propelled you to then, be in the position you're in now?
So there was always that nugget that Jane put in my brain that I might be good at something. So there's one teacher that made a difference to my life and impacted my life all the way through. So there is that. But what I did, I think a turning point was I had various factory jobs, different jobs, a couple of bits of time where I was unemployed. And then I got into tire. I kind of wanted a trade, yeah. So I got into tire and exhaust trade, and I was a trainee tire fitter, and I had a love of cars, so it was a real interest to me. And went through tire fitting, exhausts. I did my sitting guilds in exhaust fitting, brake fitting, shock absorbers, etc., and really, really excelled. And I found it was probably the way I visualized stuff. I could explain stuff to people very differently to others. So, for example, brakes overheating, I would use the analogy of a hot iron on an ironing board will travel. It's not got that much friction to stop it, but a cold iron will be juddery, and that's why you can't have brakes that are going to overheat. They need to be able to keep cool, etc. And I used to be able to explain things very differently. The other thing I liked, we had structure. So we had a telephone technique that we'd use to convert a telephone call into a visit to the branch, and I just loved the structure, and I was really good at that, and managed to turn a lot of visits. So I had this desire to grow and develop. There was a little nugget that I could do something, and I finally got my own branch, and I took on this failing branch of a national tire and exhaust company, and I managed to. I've got the trophy up there. I started in the April, and I think it was in the May. I'd won Manager of the Month, June, and won it nearly every month for the rest of that year. I'd have quadrupled the turnover. So what I did now is what I now know as Lean Six Sigma methodology, and it was removing waste and bottlenecks from the business and removing defects. So basically the tire machine was right at the back, and you only had 2 ramps, and you had to walk out to the back with the wheels and walk back and fit them back on, which is wasted time. And then there was a bottleneck, so you couldn't take on every work. And there was an old building just across the car park that was just full of junk. So on the slow days, we cleared that out, created two new tire bays, had 2 tire machines in there, and invested a bit of money. And suddenly we could do 4 times as much work because we had that, we removed that bottleneck and removed that wastage from the business, and we put in tougher QC procedures, and it was going amazing. And that was kind of the start of my journey. But then I was given a super branch, and I was working 7 days a week. I couldn't get a day off. We were struggling for staff, and it was dealing with everyone's distress purchases. And I just had a massive breakdown. And what I know now was autistic burnout. I burnt myself out. And that was when I decided then to get a job driving a truck. I just quit that job. I couldn't go back once I'd had that breakdown. And I'd seen these HGV learner trucks driving past. I thought, I'm going to do that. I want to be on my own, go and be on my own in a truck. And so I did. I got my 2-week training course, and on my second week, I got a phone call from a waste company. Went for an interview and got the job straight away before I passed my test. And that's how I ended up driving a dust cart for 9 or so years. And it was good at first, but then it started to impact my mental health. Because I was on my own in a truck, people were talking down to you like you were really stupid, and I had these sort of visions of, can I do it again? I've got something in me, but I want to have another go. And I was offered the opportunity to go in the office as a traffic dispatcher, and they asked me if I knew what Excel was. I didn't have a clue. So I bought a book, which is still up there, and one of my many books on Excel, the Beginner's Guide to Excel. And I read it on the Eurostar when the kids were doing their own thing when we went to Euro Disney. And within 6 weeks, I was teaching my manager. how to use Excel. And he looked at me and went, "You did a good impression of being thick all those years." And it was that stereotype. I kind of took it as a compliment in a way, because I'd really done some good stuff. And that was the trigger then. And I went on a management development course. I started to learn. I was an introvert. I did what you call insights, and started to learn about how my brain worked differently to other people, and how I had some skills that I'd never discovered. They would never discovered me I'd never discovered them in the education system. And I started to put that together. We did a course on management accounts, and I started to look at those. And that's when I had that trigger. Do you know what? I'm going to try and become an accountant. And that was a real big turning point. In my back of the mind, did I think I'd ever achieve it? Possibly not, but I wanted to give it a good go, and yeah, I did it. Here I am now.
It's incredible, Gavin, and it's a hell of a journey, and there's still a hell of a journey now in what you're doing now. Can you tell for the people that's listening now? Can you tell us what you're doing now and how you're helping?
So currently, until the end of January, I'm with a global automotive manufacturer. So I look from that Binman with no qualifications. I currently look after 50 million and 12 directors of a global automotive business. So that's quite a big jump from where I were. However, I'm so passionate about making a difference in people's lives that I've started 2 businesses. So one is Binman to Boardroom, based on my journey around my book. I've written this book that we mentioned, Binman to Boardroom. I'm also writing another book that is kind of the blueprint and master plan of how I managed to turn my life around and get to where I am now. So I want to deliver that. And then off the back of that, I want to deliver some courses as well. So what I've found is many businesses deliver courses once there's been a problem. There's no bite-size courses for individuals to help them before there is a problem. We need to be a bit more proactive rather than reactive. And a lot of people keep reaching out to me for help and guidance. How did you do what you do? And I thought, do you know what? I need to deliver this to a wider audience. So that's what I'm going to do. Another book in the making, some training courses. I want to try and do some keynote talking as well, and get out there and talk and try and make a difference and inspire people. So that's one business. The other business is New Vantage Business Services. So New Vantage, you might see the thing in the name there. So new for neurodiversity, and vantage, the advantage of the neurodivergent brain. And the ethos is think differently to elevate your business. And what it is a CIMA certified chartered accountancy practice. So we offer from compliance right up to almost a strategic FD, fractional FD service, and any other sort of business opportunities as well to help business owners grow. And my long-term vision with that is everyone says that there's a massive skills gap in the UK, but there isn't. There's people out there with skills, but they've not been recognised, and many of them are sat at home in bedrooms feeling that they're useless. So my dream is to build a business where I can give other people that haven't done well academically a chance in to get a career in finance.
Well, Gavin, it sounds like you've got a hell of a journey, and I honestly wish you the very best with it. And what a journey you've been on, and you've got so much to offer within the skills and the knowledge that you've created, and the work that you're doing. We wish you the very best with the book. It is literally, I've started reading this, and I will finish reading this, and I cannot thank you enough for being a guest on Neurodiversity Stories. If people would like to connect with yourself, how do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm quite prevalent on LinkedIn. I do post on there a lot. Binman to Boardroom now has a YouTube channel. So I'm starting to do some good YouTube videos on there, just to try and give people insight of, and I talk about environment, I talk about confidence, etc. So I'm starting to build those up. TikTok, the same videos there on TikTok if you prefer that channel. Say I'm on Facebook and Instagram with Binman to Boardroom, and then New Vantage is just on LinkedIn and Instagram. So yeah, plenty of opportunities to follow my journey there.